those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Before the advent of the field radio, the bugler was one of the most important members of a fighting force, since battlefield maneuvers were relayed by bugle calls. This is the grave of Civil War bugler John Cook. During the Battle of Antietam, he was nearby when the men of a Union artillery battery fell under heavy fire. Cook dropped his bugle and manned a station, earning himself a Medal of Honor at just 15 years of age. And one of the most familiar and emotionally powerful bugle melodies is taps. Its origins date back to the early days of the Civil War, but to the surprise of many, it was not intended to be used as a funeral ballad.
A state funeral with full military honors for a fallen president, John F. Kennedy. Millions around the world watch and listen as a haunting melody, glorious and somber, rings out.
Taps is universally known as an American call. It is uniquely American. You can play it anywhere in the world and people will automatically recognize the melody.
The origin of taps dates back to the Civil War and a Union general. In July of 1862, General Daniel Butterfield and his brigade are encamped at Harrison's Landing, Virginia. They are recovering from the battles known as the 7 Days, a struggle over the Confederate capital of Richmond that left over 29,000 men wounded or dead. Desiring something more melodious, Butterfield decides to change the bugle call used to order the troops to end their day. The call for lights out.
The call for lights out was a French call called extinguish lights, and it sounded like this. Now, it's a very military sounding call, and he wasn't very satisfied with those notes as being a call for the end of the day.
Butterfield has a replacement in mind, one that will help his men bear the heat, humidity, mud, and dysentery of those difficult days in July.
General Butterfield created taps out of an earlier bugle call, a call that had gone out of use in the United States Army prior to the Civil War. And that call was known as the Scots Tattoo.
Tattoo is from a Dutch phrase meaning shut off the spigots. In other words, stop drinking and return to quarters. This tattoo comes from the Winfield Scott Military Manual of 1835, thus making it the Scots Tattoo.
The way that taps is different from the 1835 Scots Tattoo is that the notes are much longer, drawn out, and the bottom note, which was impossible to play, was taken out. So that the beginning of taps now that we know today sounds like this.
Taps, as the signal for the troops to end the day and begin rest, spreads quickly to other units throughout the Army, and even comes to be used by the Confederates. But the decision to use taps in a burial service arises out of necessity.
Shortly after the creation of taps, a captain in an artillery company had a burial ceremony for one of his cannoneers that had been killed. He was afraid of having the 3 traditional volleys fired at the funeral for fear that others would think that renewed fighting had started. So instead he decided to have the bugler sound the notes, the taps, and that's the first time that we have on record that taps was sounded at a funeral. After the Civil War, taps was played at funerals all the time, but it's not until 1891 that it's officially recognized in the manuals as being part of a military funeral. "72 years later,
November 25th, 1963, Arlington National Cemetery. The burial of a president.
The bugler who sounded taps that day was an Army bugler by the name of Keith Clark. He had been standing out here for about 3 hours or so waiting for the funeral procession to arrive, and it was very cold. So when you have the combination of very cold weather and knowing that over 20 million people are going to be listening to you, those are like the two worst enemies of any brass player. And the whole world remembers that he cracked one of the notes. There were newspapers and magazines that picked up on it, thinking that the bugler was showing emotion, that his lip, as one put it, quivered for the nation. It certainly was a mistake, but the fact that it has reached almost a folklore type status in our country, it's a wonderful thing. It's like the crack in the Liberty Bell. It's always going to be there, and it will always be part of our American heritage.
Air Force Master Sergeant Yari Villanueva is one of the foremost authorities of this military coda. He shared these thoughts about taps. Its echoes linger in the heart long after its tones cease to vibrate in the air. Same can be said of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Their legacy lingers, and their bravery is not forgotten. For the History Channel, I'm Josh Binswanger. Thanks for watching.